Thank you all for being here. That's all right. So that's going to take a minute to pull up. For some reason, it gets to 86%, and it has to think a minute. My name is Heather Dion. I'm the Executive Director of CASA of Central Oregon, and I appreciate you guys having me here. While my presentation's pulling up, I'll just introduce a little bit about myself and then talk about my organization. So I am originally from the Willamette Valley, and I have worked for CASA for about the last 4 years. I spent the last 2 years as the development director doing fundraising, and then 2 years in my current role as the executive director. And I first heard about CASA, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, back when I had my very first job when I was working in Corvallis. And I was working with a gentleman, and like, we're just chit-chatting, and what does he do? And he talked about he's a volunteer CASA, and he told me about what that means is that he gets to know a child in foster care, and he gets to know everyone in their family, and then he speaks for them. And any time that their case is heard in front of a judge, he speaks on behalf of that child. He can attend doctor's appointments, he can attend school appointments, and that he had been the CASA and the volunteer for this child for several years. And I remember as he was talking about it, thinking at the time, I was about 21, that's incredible. And that's the most incredible volunteer experience I've ever heard of, and that's wonderful for what you're doing for a child. I've now worked for CASA for 4 years, and we have several hundred volunteers over the course of those years, and I still feel that way every single day, and I still feel that way about every one of our volunteers. So, to give you a little bit of a background on our organization, our mission is that we're a nonprofit organization that recruits, trains, and supports volunteers to advocate for the best interest of abused and neglected children in the court system. CASA volunteers work in collaboration. They work within the courts. We are volunteers of the State of Oregon Justice Department, or Department of Justice. We work in collaboration with key agencies, so that includes ODHS, Department of Human Services, Legal Counsel, and Community Resources. So that includes volunteer organizations, treatment organizations, schools. And our goal is to ensure that every child in foster care in Central Oregon can transition to a safe and permanent home. And that is our goal because we believe that all children have the inherent right to be safe, to be treated with dignity and respect, and to learn and grow in the safe embrace of a loving family. So that's why we do what we do, and that's our mission statement. But put more succinctly, a CASA volunteer is an ordinary person who does extraordinary things for a child in foster care. And our organization, CASA of Central Oregon, our mission is that we recruit, train, and support these volunteers so that they can serve as many children as possible in foster care. To give you a little bit of history, so the CASA program was started in 1977 in Seattle. And it was started because a judge, David Sukup, that gentleman right up there, Judge Sukup, he was in the story goes that he was in a trial, and he was in what's called the TPR trial. That was a trial to terminate a parent's rights from their child. So he was going to forever legally sever a child from their parents. And he's looking around the courtroom, and he is seeing the parents, and he's seeing the parents' attorneys, and he's seeing the Department of Human Services in Washington. And he's seeing all of these people here, and he does not see the child, and he's about to make a decision that's going to forever alter this child's life, and he has no idea how that child feels about this decision, and he has no idea how this decision is going to affect this child. And so that's how he started the CASA program, because he wanted to make sure that there was somebody in his courtroom when he's making that decision who can tell him, this is how this decision affects this child. And so that's how the CASA program was started. It is a national program. There's CASA programs all over the country in various different states. Some of you may be familiar with them from other states. In Oregon, we are one of 20 programs. CASA was established in Central Oregon in 1992. And then in 2005, the programs for Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties all merged into the program that we have today, which is CASA of Central Oregon. We're one of 20 programs in the state of Oregon. We're an independent nonprofit, so we work in partnership with the other CASA programs, but we are our own independent nonprofit with an independent board of directors. Our program serves children in foster care as far north as Madras, as far south as Lapine, as far east as out past Prineville. Crook County is pretty extensive out there, and as far west as the Camp Sherman Black Butte area. So it's an area of about 7,000 square miles. And our program is assigned to every child who's in foster care within that area. So if you're asking how many children that is, it's quite a few. So far this year, so up through the first part of August, in 2022, 373 children have spent time in foster care in Central Oregon. Within that, the vast majority are from here in Deschutes County, 269, but there are quite a few from Crook County and Jefferson County as well. Our program so far this year has served 83% of those children with a CASA volunteer, something I'm very proud of. We typically, over the course of the year, will hit about 85% on average, which is great. We're one of the higher percentage of service in the state. And we're able to do that because through the course of this year, we've had 163 volunteers who are advocating for children. So that's how we do what we do. Throughout the course of the year, so when we complete 2022, we'll probably be looking at more than 400 children. Last year we had about 430 children over the course of the year. We'll probably hit about 400, 420 by the time the year is done. And so the specifics of what a CASA volunteer do, it's like, oh, we advocate for children. Well, what does that look like? So every CASA volunteer completes training. They complete 40 hours of training, and then they are sworn in by a circuit court judge to serve as an officer of the court. And then they are assigned to a child or a sibling group. And so they really develop a relationship with that child and that sibling, those children, and then they get to know everybody in that child's life. So what that looks like is they meet with a child at least once a month, and they get to know everyone in the child's life, including attending school conferences, IEP meetings, 504 plan meetings, RAP services meetings. They get to know the caseworker, they get to know the foster parents, they get to know the child's biological parents, grandparents, everyone in that child's life. They review medical records and therapy records. CASAs are considered a party to the case, so they have access to everything related to that child. And then anytime that a case is heard in court, so that is when a child is removed, then the major decisions about their life are being made by a judge. And the judge has regular court hearings to say, how is the case going? And anytime that that case is heard in front of a judge, the CASA writes a court report, and then the CASA goes to court and then speaks on behalf of that child. So that situation that Judge Sukup was talking about, where these decisions are made that affect the child, anytime that decision is made in Central Oregon, the judge is hearing how it affects the child and how the child is doing. And so why is this important? So children come into foster care because they've experienced abuse and neglect and they're not safe in their homes. That's a simplified way of saying it. So what happens is a child is found to be not safe in their home, and the Department of Human Services goes and removes that child. And then they go in front of court and they say this child is in an imminent threat of harm, and the state of Oregon must take custody immediately. That's when a child comes into foster care. There's any number of reasons a child might come into foster care. Common reasons are physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect, or exposure to violence. Those are the most common reasons that a child comes into foster care. So these children have experienced profound trauma before they ever come into foster care. That's the reason that they have been removed. And then I often say that life in foster care is like being between a rock and a hard place for a child, because they're no longer in a place where they were in an unsafe living situation. But the state of Oregon is a pretty bad parent, if I'm going to be honest about it. We're not great at raising children. And so what that looks like for a child in Central Oregon is that they'll stay in the system an average of 2 years. That's how long their case will be open. In that amount of time, they'll live in an average of 3 different foster homes, and they'll have an average of 3 different caseworkers. So there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of upheaval, there's a lot of inconsistency in a child's life. They've already experienced this trauma. So that's what I mean, where it's between a rock and a hard place. Now they're safe, they're physically safe, but there's a lot of inconsistency, there's a lot of just continuing instability for a child's life. So as an organization, we want to make it our job that those children have one CASA volunteer. So that is the one consistent, stable person in their life during their time in foster care. And so we can talk about why it's important. So it's important because I believe that all children should have consistent, stable adults in their life, and it's a benefit, that intangible benefit, when a child knows that an adult cares about them and is showing up for them. That you can't measure that, but that is absolutely important. What we can measure is that children, national studies have shown that children who have a CASA volunteer fare better during their time in foster care than children who don't. And what looks like is children with CASA volunteers, they do better in school. They're less likely to be expelled, and their grades are better. They are more likely to receive the services that they need to heal and to thrive. That includes things like dental services, that includes things like going to the doctor's office, mental health services, behavioral health services, occupational therapy, all of the things. Children who have experienced profound trauma, they need a lot of assistance, and when they have a CASA, they're more likely to receive the services that they need. They move into a safe and permanent home more quickly, an average of 5 to 6 months more quickly when a child has a CASA volunteer compared to when they don't. And then they're less likely to re-enter foster care when a child has a CASA volunteer. So there's the intangible benefits, and then there's the very specific tangible benefits of the just having that one consistent adult in that child's life who's speaking for them and advocating for them absolutely helps children. And I can talk about it on a broad level, but I can also show you a video where one of our volunteers does what they do best, which is share about a child. So let's hope that the sound works, and if it doesn't, we will figure that out. Everyone hear it okay? Cool.
Carla had just turned 11 when I first met her. Shortly after her 11th birthday, she came into care. Her mom had passed away, and she was living with her mom's live-in boyfriend at the time. And it got to the point where he was not able to take care of her.
I like to read, sometimes write, ride horses, hang out with my friends, my family. I love binge watching shows so much fun. While I was in foster care, I did not think that I would get adopted. I thought I would just be going from place to place forever.
Carla is an amazing kid. She is so resilient. She's been through so much. What really stands out about Carla is her ability to be around horses that I'm actually afraid of. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. Once a child is placed into foster care, a CASA is appointed to the case, and we advocate for the child all the way through the court system as long as their case is open.
I was nervous, just a new person in my life. I was pretty young, so I wasn't very well with all these new people. But I really liked her. She was really nice. Every time I moved, Lori was at the house the day after to make sure I was settling in and that it was safe for us, really.
The CASA is really important because we are assigned 1 or 2 cases, whatever we choose. So we've got the time to really focus on that individual, that child, and really advocate for what is in their best interest. It may not always be what that child wants, but it is what's in their best interest.
Lori was pretty much just a shoulder to cry on through all the hard times, and she was just right there next to me every day. After I moved home, she was there, and she made sure that I was with a family that was going to take care of me and be really good for me.
She's intelligent, of course she's beautiful inside and out, outgoing, determined, sassy. When Lori came over when we met for the first time, it was like having a friend over. It was incredible. We sat and chatted for what felt like hours. She was so kind, and you could see her passion in what she does and how much she wanted to be there for Carla and wanted to help us. It's just been great having her involved. I can't imagine not having her involved. I kind of think of her as our cheerleader. If Carla had not had a CASA, I think it would have been a lot more challenging. I think we would have had times of maybe even feeling discouraged, and I just knew that she was someone that I could always count on to be there.
It's really important for a kid in foster care to have a CASA CASA because we're the one person that are going to be there from the beginning to the end. She had 4 different foster homes, 5 different schools, and 3 different caseworkers during that period of time. She's been in the system for 4 years and now is finally adopted. She has had 1 CASA during that whole period of time. Even though the case is closed with Carla, I'm still going to be in her life. She doesn't need me, but I'm still going to be there if she does.
I just want her to have the life that I know she's capable of having and that she deserves to have.
I was really grateful to have Lori in my life for the past 4.5 years through all the rough times, and she's just helped so much. I would tell someone that is thinking about supporting CASA that it's really helpful for kids, and I think that there needs to be more CASAs around.
So my ask here is that if you are interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, or if you know somebody who's interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, or just is interested in learning more about it, we do have a couple of training sessions that are going to begin this fall. Like I said, we're serving, over the course of the year, we'll probably serve about 85% of children in foster care. I think all children deserve an advocate. I think all children deserve a Lori. And the reason why we're not there is because we don't have enough volunteers. So that is why my ask is to, if you know of somebody who this might be a passion for them or might be a calling for them, or has said, oh, I'm looking for something to give back, becoming a CASA volunteer is one of the most impactful things that you can do for our community's most vulnerable children. So, like I said, we have 2 trainings starting this fall. We have one, they're both going to start in September. One is going to be online. That's going to be Tuesday evenings, and that's a really nice one, particularly if you live a little bit out of town. It's just you can just do an online training from your home. Or we have an in-person one that we are scheduled to have in Madras, which will be Thursday evenings. The process, if somebody wants to do it, is to go to our website, casaofcentraloregon.org. You complete a volunteer application that includes a background check and an interview. It's 40 hours of classroom training. It's pretty extensive. This is a above and beyond volunteer job, and it asks a lot of our volunteers. You're working within the court system, within child welfare, and so we want to make sure that everybody goes through a pretty extensive training to do that well. And then after that, you're sworn in as by a circuit court judge, and you're an officer of the court, and you're assigned a child or a sibling group. All of our volunteers work really closely with staff. We've got 10 folks on staff, and all of our volunteers are assigned a staff person to work really closely with and support them in the process. So I've just talked to you a lot, but I will open it up and ask for any questions. Or yeah.
How does this relate to every child?
Yeah.
Every child is a state agency? Right?
No, Every Child is another nonprofit organization, and they're wonderful. We worked very closely with them. Every Child does foster parent recruitment, so they work to try to establish more foster homes, which is great because we need them in Central Oregon. They also provide sort of the tangible needs for children in foster care, so things like we'll work with Every Child. Well, this summer we had a child that wanted to go to summer camp, and the CASA was able to work with the camp to get a scholarship for most of the cost. But as any of us who are parents know that summer camps are pretty expensive, and there was still a remainder that the scholarship didn't cover, and the resource family could not afford it. So we reached out to Every Child, and we were asked if they could pay for it, and they did. So Every Child is a great partner with us for more of those tangible needs.
One other question. Yes. Came from Michigan. Back in Michigan, we had a group called Big Family. And what they did was specifically focus on kids that are aging out or have aged out of the foster care system. Do we have a similar kind of organization?
There's a program through the state called ILP, which is Independent Living Project, and that is where kids who are coming up, ages 14 and above, it looks like they've either been in foster care or they are, and that helps provide them with some of those life services and life skills and budgeting and how do you apply for a job and housing. That's a big issue for kids who are coming out of foster care. So ILP services provide some of that. Yeah. But that's a really vulnerable age for kids. And so I think all the services we can provide, the better. Yeah. Yeah.
More of a comment than a question. Worked with education for a long, long time and really appreciate CASA being there for these kids who have these kinds of issues in their lives. And so that, and everybody that I've ever known who has been a CASA, I've really felt that it was a super thing for them to do, and they really appreciated the opportunity. So I'd encourage anybody who has an interest to contact you, because it's a great opportunity to work with kids.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Also a former educator, and I had a friend who worked with CASA, and every couple of months we'd have breakfast out once a week. He came and just gave me and said, you know, I think I made the world a better place this week.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Remind me, who connects the child with the foster parent, and what service works with that?
Yeah, that's ODHS. So when a child comes into foster care, the major decisions about their life, whether to return them back to their parent, when to return them, to terminate, that's made by the judge. The day-to-day decisions are made by ODHS, the Department of Human Services. And so they have a caseworker. What the state wants to do, first of all, is to try to find a family placement. So that is grandparents, aunts, uncles, relatives, family, friends, someone who that child knows to try to put that child with. If that's not available, if there's not a safe place for that child, then they'll go to a foster home. It's currently called a resource home, who the child doesn't know. So, but ODHS makes those decisions. Yeah. Yeah.
How long of a commitment is it for CASA volunteers?
Yeah, so like I said, the average time a child spends in foster care is 2 years. So we ask our volunteers if they can commit for 2 years. Life happens, people move, illnesses come up, but that's one of the questions in the interview is can you be a volunteer for 2 years, because we want a lot of consistency. After training, the training is pretty specific. There's those times, and it's 4 hours in the evenings. After training, we typically say on average 10 to 15 hours a month, and there's a lot more flexibility. So that can be built around a work schedule. That's visiting the child, that's attending court hearings, meetings, that kind of thing, and that can be evenings, weekends, a little bit during the day. So depending on the case, depending on the situation, 10 to 15 hours a month, and it can be pretty flexible.
How many kids will one CASA person have at one time?
It depends. So on average, every CASA volunteer serves 2.5 children. So the 0.5, how many of us serve half a children? None. So it's a child or a sibling group. So typically it's one or two children in a case. When a CASA starts, we just start with one case. After they've been doing it for 6 months or a year, they might say, okay, I'm ready to take on 2 cases. And then they might be working with more children. We've got some of our super CASAs who 3, 4 cases. They've got 8 kids that they're juggling. But typically it's just 1 or 2 to start.
Does the CASA help if there's siblings?
Yes.
Do they
Yes.
use both siblings, or do they?
Yes.
Do they each have a CASA?
Typically we have one CASA for all of the siblings. Siblings are not always placed together. They can be in several different homes. And so that's why we want one CASA, because they can be that point of connection, keeping those kids and those siblings connected to each other. Sometimes we have cases where there's 4, 5, 6 kids. That's a lot for one CASA. So we might put 2 CASAs on those cases and then just ask that they work really closely together. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the hard things that might happen. And it's like, well, you as a CASA are supporting that child. Then there's the foster parents who are supporting that child. I'm just kind of going, what happens when there's disagreements between these groups? How does a CASA handle that kind of stuff?
Well, so you said the right word, when there are disagreements in those groups, because there will be disagreements in those between those groups, because you've got the resource parents or the foster parents, you've got the state, you've got the biological parents who are often involved still in the case. So you've got a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. And so the CASA is a challenging position. They have to sometimes you got to kind of do some nuances. The bottom line is the CASA is there for the best interest of the child. And sometimes we have to remind people of that and to say, okay, but I'm here for the child. Okay, but we all care about this child, right? Like, we're all here for this child. That's typically the best way to handle it, is we can say, all right, We can have some disagreements. We're all here for this child. But regularly, CASAs will make recommendations that are against what somebody else wants. And so we have to try to figure out ways as much as possible to maintain the relationship and still have a difference of opinion. Yeah. At the end of the day, the CASA is just making recommendations. The major decisions are made by ODHS and the judge. So the CASA can make recommendations all day long, and our recommendations are often followed, but not always followed.
Recommendations to ODA, to
We
Human Services
do, or the judge. We make them. Yep, and then they will do what they're going to do. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Our club has a little gift for you.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet.
One of our handmade Redmond Kiwanis pens.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.